My ex-wife lost a bet and ended up with a husband. I leaned back in a large, comfortable leather chair, one of several in the reception hall of the country club we belonged to, thanks to my ex-father-in-law's exceptional wealth. I shifted my gaze to the clock hanging in the shadows on the wall. It was already 7 p.m. It would soon be time to head home. Alyssa Taylor Trevelyan, a.k.a. McLeod, was still blabbering on about the strange things that had happened in her crazy life. Alyssa is my ex-wife. I am Gavin McLeod. I'm 47 years old. I'm a geneticist, scientist. I'm short. I weigh 140 pounds. I have brown eyes and brown hair with a little gray. In my opinion, I have a number of qualities that make me quite suitable for marriage. I am hardworking, honest, stable, firm, dependable, and quite smart about most things. On the other hand, I am told that I have about as much sexuality in me as a manila folder. If anyone has any doubts about that last assessment, all they have to do is ask the girl duo sitting across from me. The duo A is Alyssa, who is sitting across from me and acting as she usually does. She's a neat little blonde, 49-year-old with blue eyes who still weighs the same 110 pounds she did when she first graduated from college. By any man's standards, she's beautiful, but she's also demanding to look after. I should know this. I've paid for all of her surgeries and trips to beauty salons since she got married and then divorced me. Believe me, I'm not complaining, not at all. You will never hear me complain, not in the slightest. I'm serious. I don't have any money anyway. There she sits, that ungrateful wretch. She's all dressed up in a $2,000 designer dress she's only going to wear once. She's wearing 4-inch heels and God knows how much expensive jewelry. I'll find out the cost of the jewelry sometime next week. She really shouldn't be wearing those shoes, but no one can stop her when she makes up her mind about something. This dress is something. Pale blue mini empire-style waist, tight bodice that keeps pushing her up and out, showing off her small but adorable rosebuds. It doesn't help that plunging neckline either. I doubt it, but maybe they'll fall out. That skirt bottom, short hem, and frothy pleats that won't go down all day drive me crazy. She knows it too. Of course, she's not wearing pantyhose, but tight-fitting nylon stockings down to her thighs. She used some kind of glue to keep them from rolling down. Sitting the way she sits, anyone can look right under her dress and see her underwear. I know why she's doing all this. She's trying to piss me off. And she's succeeding. Damn little stinker. I wish she'd shut up. She's talking about me again. I can see her. She's been watching me as much as I've been watching her. Look at her. She's leaning over to the woman next to her. It's Dolores Manning, Mrs. Manning to Alyssa and me. She's in her late 70s, and she was Alyssa's father's second wife. Alyssa's father came home a few hours ago. He is now working on finding wife number 4. She is a 20-something from Poland. Alyssa is the product of his first marriage. His first wife died. Alyssa whispers something and points at me. She thinks I can't hear her, but I do. Listen to her. She's at it again. Alyssa looked at Mrs. Manning. Look at him. He doesn't fool me for a minute. Just look at him squirming there. Why did I do that? Tell me, who would want to marry an awkward, skinny geezer like him? But I won't go, and he won't go until I want him to. I listened to her. Look at her. She's trying to make a fool of me again. Look at her as she leans forward. She clenches her hands together and pretends she needs to scream to get my attention. Alyssa calls out, "Gavin, put your glasses on." I forgot my glasses. Where did I put them? I fumble in my tuxedo pockets. Here they are. They're horn-rimmed, but I'm used to them. Alyssa calls them my horn-rimmed monsters. I guess I could have chosen a different style, but I know these piss her off. Picking them up, I tell her, "There, see, I found them." She thinks she's so smart. She thinks I can't see her without my glasses. I can see her. I saw her just when she had to use her left hand to get her chest back in place. I nod my head again and smile. "Thank you, Alyssa." Listen to her. She thinks because I can't see well, I can't hear well, anyone would think that after 27 years I don't care if I'm married or not. She would know. Listen to her. Alyssa whispered to Mrs. Manning. I have to smile at that dumb-headed machine gunner son of mine. Of course, everyone thinks he's so smart, mitochondrial DNA and all that, so what? I smiled sweetly at my ex-wife. She smiled back. I heard her whisper, that idiot who was my husband still wants to marry me again. Here she is pointing at me, saying, I'm talking about you, so pay attention. I look at her and smile. I have to listen to our story again. Well, I guess I better. If I don't, I can't correct her stupid lie. I should give her a good spanking. I wish I could, but I can't. Listen to her. Stupid dumb head. Here she is. As I was saying, Alyssa glanced at me again. We met in Oslo. He was there with a group of researchers. They made some interesting discoveries about DNA. It seems that all Caucasians have traces of Neanderthals in their DNA. Gavin was involved in that discovery. My mom and dad were there, accompanying our English contingent. I was fresh out of college at the time and had been through a tragically failed romantic relationship, so I went with them too. You should have seen Gavin. He looked like a lost little boy. He needed someone to take care of him, would hold his hand. Melissa Enders, a much younger woman sitting on a nearby couch, said, And you decided to babysit. Alyssa smiled at her. You could say that. I was there with my mom and dad, but there were a lot of other people my age there, and some of them were old friends. You know, college friends. We all paid attention to it. We talked it over, and I guess you could say I took him as a sort of bet. A wager, stammered the elderly Mrs. Manning. Oh, of course you did, Mrs. Manning. You should have seen him. No decent woman would pay any attention to him. It's now that he looks neat and tidy in his shiny white tuxedo, but back then he was a sight to behold. His clothes were wrinkled and ill-fitting. His shoes were brown and scuffed. His hair was uncombed, and he was wearing white socks. Imagine white socks at a gathering of Nobel laureates. The only thing recognizable about him today were the scary glasses. He definitely needed help. She looked at me, her ex-husband. She frowned. I didn't seem to be listening to her, so she called out, Are you listening, Gavin? I heard her and had to say something. It wasn't quite like that. I stayed up all that night with my co-workers. Several pieces of fossilized Neanderthal came to us, and it doesn't look like they were wrapped properly. The slightest exposure could have ruined the specimen, so we stayed up rewrapping it. I didn't get much sleep, and I didn't have time to dress up like some people I know. I glared at her. Alyssa waved me off and looked at the others. 2 other people appeared. Old Mr. Andrews, the current president of the country club, and Alan Shawcroft, Melissa's guest. Alyssa continued, Shut up, Gavin. You were a ragamuffin. My friends and I used to flip coins. I lost, and you became my responsibility. I had to be responsible for cleaning you up and making you presentable. And did you manage it? Mrs. Manning asked. It wasn't easy, Mrs. Manning. Melissa asked, Did he know it was on a bet? Alyssa smiled. No, not right away. For quite a while. Melissa looked puzzled. So you lost the bet and ended up getting a husband? Alyssa grinned. He's not my husband anymore. I nodded and muttered, Thank God. I immediately realized I had made a mistake and said, That's not what I meant. I could see that Alyssa still looked hurt, so I added, She divorced me. Alyssa, regaining her confidence, replied, I had to. No self-respecting wife could have stayed with him. Alan Shawcroft, being a complete outsider, asked, I don't understand. Alyssa leaned back. Her dress was pulled up, the top of her underwear clearly visible. Let me explain. Everyone leaned over. I interrupted her. What are you going to explain? She pouted. I'm going to tell them about us. I muttered, That's bullshit. She continued. I just graduated from college. It took me a little longer. My senior year of high school, I got in a skiing accident and lost a little time. But eventually I graduated and went to Oslo with my parents for the Nobel Prize. Don Juan over there, she pointed to her ex-husband. He was there to receive some kind of award. And like I said, he was confused. After my friends and I talked it over, we decided that I should be his savior. I set to work. Young Melissa interjected, "Didn't you say you were recovering from a broken heart?" Alyssa replied, "Yes, that's partly true, but the man I was dating, we had already broken up. He wanted something from me that I wasn't ready to give up yet." "What was that?" Melissa asked. Alyssa pulled up her dress and stroked her body. It made me uncomfortable. "Come on, she's a middle-aged woman." She paid no attention to that and continued. "I was still a virgin at the time and I didn't think the boy was worth the price." She glared at me. "I ended up giving him to some asshole." She winked at me. "But let me get back to the asshole that is Gavin. Like I said, he needed more than just a bath. My friends and I had dragged him out of lunch. That's where we were. It was only a quasi-official reception, so there were no major repercussions. Once we were outside, all my friends quietly dispersed as we had planned, leaving me with Gavin over there." She pointed at me again. "I told him that since I couldn't leave, he should drive me home. The idiot didn't have a car, so we took a cab. By the way, I had to pay the cab fare. Numbskull didn't have any money. Together, we walked back to the house where my parents and I lived. I persuaded him to walk me upstairs where I changed into something more casual." I interrupted. "She means she took off her bra." Alyssa frowned. "Shut up, Gavin, that's my story. Well, I took off my bra and put on a nice miniskirt and a white blouse. Then I told him we were going shopping. I took him out and bought him a whole new closet." I stopped her. "Let me say something for a minute." Alyssa looked at me. "Keep it short." "That's my story." I warned. "It's your version of our story, but I'll be brief." I looked around at everyone. Most of you have heard this before, but in a nutshell, Alyssa played the role of Professor Henry Higgins to my Eliza Doolittle. Shawcroft chuckled. "Oh, I get it. It's Pygmalion, like George Bernard Shaw." I smiled. Well, she tried. Alyssa spoke again. "I would have succeeded too, but he was too stupid," she muttered, "and still is." Melissa cut in. "In My Fair Lady, Professor Higgins didn't—" I smiled. "That's Alyssa's thing too." Alyssa cut in. "My story, remember?" We all sat back down comfortably. Alyssa continued. "Well, I took him to a clothier. My father is rich, so money wasn't an issue, just his stupid pride." She pointed at me again. "But I took care of it." "How did you do that?" Melissa asked. Alyssa smiled broadly. "I have my ways." Where was I? Oh, I picked out a new closet for him. We went to the barbershop and I made sure he got a decent haircut. I tidied him up and freshened him up, everything except those stupid glasses. I interjected, "I can't wear contacts." Alyssa pouted. "Tell me about it." I bought him new clothes. I had about 2 weeks and I started walking him. I redressed him and wanted to show him off. Somewhere along the way, this skinny asshole fell in love with me. Believe me, I had no idea. He found out I was living in London. He was transferred to a research center in England. When I came home 2 weeks later, he was already there. He rented an apartment, bought a cheap car, and started stalking me. Mrs. Manning learned something new. "Stalking, you say?" Alyssa thought about her words. "Not exactly stalking. He started calling and asking me out on dates. I told my girlfriends about the American asshole who had a crush on me and kept stalking me. Many of them were the same friends who tricked me into a bet. They took it a step further. I don't know how they talked me into it, but they convinced me to seduce that guy lover over there to ask if I would marry him." I spoke up. "I didn't know any of that." Melissa asked Alyssa, "Did you—" "Seduced him, I mean." Alyssa continued. "It was like taking candy from a kid. Here's a guy who graduated from an American high school at 15. He went straight to university, from there to graduate school, and then went straight into scientific research. He knew about sex, but he'd never had a real relationship. To tell you the truth, I even felt sorry for him. Within a month, he was head over heels in love with me." Alan Shawcroft asked, "And then what happened?" I leaned back in my chair. I wondered how she would feel about this. Alyssa calmed down a little. He really fell in love with me. He really fell in love. I didn't think it would happen. Melissa nodded. Yeah? Well, Alyssa was almost whispering. He asked me to marry him. Shawcroft asked, and what? He got down on one knee? Alyssa looked at me. With all her problems, I don't think she thought she would talk about it, not today. Alyssa sighed. Yes, he got down on one knee. What's more, she sighed again, he did it in a restaurant in front of a dozen of my friends. We were having lunch at a nice Spanish restaurant. Everyone was having a drink. I didn't notice, and Gavin didn't notice. He made do with water and iced tea all evening. She paused again and smiled weakly. Imagine iced tea in a Spanish restaurant in England. Anyway, a musician with a mandolin appeared almost out of nowhere. He started playing something wistful. I interrupted. He played Somewhere Once Upon a Dream, and it wasn't dreary. She nodded uncertainly. Yes, it was. It was very sad. Absolutely sad. But you made it worse. She looked at the others. Oh, yes. He got down on one knee. My friends didn't know what was going on. And I didn't know either. Then he pulled out a small box. He opened it and took out a ring. He held it out and... I interrupted again. I asked her to marry me. Mrs. Manning asked. And then what happened? Alyssa quietly, very quietly replied. All my friends started laughing. Then Melissa asked, Oh my gosh, what did Gavin do? Alyssa replied, He didn't know anything. He just kneeled down and looked at me. He was so sincere. The love on his face was palpable. I felt bad for him. He looked like a stray puppy. My friends slowly started to realize that he was being serious. One by one, they stopped laughing. He just kneeled there, holding that stupid ring and looking at me. I think he started to realize that something was wrong. He asked me, Am I overreacting? I was so stunned. I couldn't think of what to say, and then one of my friends looked at the ring. She said, Oh, how nice. A quarter carat? I was so embarrassed. One of my friends grinned and said to me, Looks like you won. Then Gavin looked at me and said, Won? Won what? Mrs. Manning was visibly displeased. I've never heard anything like that before. Alyssa shrugged. Even after 27 years, that night still brought tears to her eyes, and she added, He had no idea it was all a joke, a stupid joke. I never thought that he really fell in love with me. Fell so much in love that he wanted to marry me, and then he proposed to me right there in a public restaurant. I spoke up. I was stupid, I guess. Alyssa looked at me. No, you weren't. I was cruel. All this time, I never thought of you as a person. You were just a game to me. Then one of my friends made it all clear. He looked at Gavin and told him, We made a bet with Alyssa. We bet that she couldn't get you to ask her to marry you. Alyssa sighed. I wouldn't dream of it. I never thought he would go this far. To ask me, and even in public. I saw the look on his face. Suddenly, I realized two things. I realized that I'd done a terrible thing. And secondly, I realized that I had fallen in love with him too. Melissa spoke up. And then what happened? I remained silent. It was Alyssa's show. I watched her look at Melissa, then at all of us in turn, stopping one last time at me. I could see that even after all this time, she was moved. Alyssa said, Gavin, he didn't give up. He sat back in his chair, removed the ring, and said, I think I remember what he said. Gee, I didn't know. The joke. It's a good joke. I think the joke's on me. Then he looked at me, smiled, and said, Listen, it's getting late. I should probably get going. He slowly stood up, slid his chair under the table, looked at me and said softly, I don't want to stay and ruin the rest of the evening. Maybe you can give one of your friends a ride home." He then leaned over, kissed me on the cheek, and walked out of the restaurant. I was so stunned. I watched him hand the maitre d' a wad of money to the maitre d' and point to our table. And then he disappeared. Shawcroft asked, "What happened?" Alyssa replied, "Nothing. I just sat there. I felt so stupid. I didn't just feel like a fool because I humiliated a beautiful person. I felt like a fool because it hit me. I wanted that ring. I wanted that stupid quarter-carat diamond ring. Imagine that. My father has millions. I got 2-carat diamond earrings when I was in elementary school." Shawcroft added, "You stood up. You followed him, didn't you?" Alyssa sat up and replied, "No, I didn't do anything." All my friends started laughing again. They were congratulating me on my prank. Some even laughed at how we had pranked the Yankees. I laughed with them. I laughed so hard that I started to cry. I did cry. Only I cried for the wrong reason. Melissa asked in surprise, "Then what happened?" Alyssa replied, "We stayed there for another hour or so. I went home alone. I called his apartment, but no one answered. Then I went to bed. The next day I went to see him. He had already left. I went to the university where he was doing research. They told me there that he was already there, that he had quit, that he was going back to the States." "What did you do then?" Shawcroft asked. "First I went home and had a good cry. Then I called at Heathrow. He had nothing booked there. I called around. He was booked from Luton. I used Dad's inquiry service and found out he had booked a flight to Germany. He wasn't going straight back to America." "So what then?" Melissa asked. "Oh, I went crazy. I had to find him. I had to apologize, but most of all, I wanted to say yes to him." I stopped her. "If I may, Alyssa, I'll add a little extra." Alyssa nodded, and I continued. "I was really upset about the bet and everything, but at the time I didn't even think about the size of the ring. I knew her family was rich, but the ring was more of a symbol to me. Anyway, I felt really bad. I wasn't angry or anything. I just felt stupid. I kept kicking myself, figuratively speaking. I should have known better. I was a working-class guy from Scranton, Pennsylvania, and she was from St. John's Woods. I put the ring away and made a promise to myself to use it as a reminder that I would never make a fool of myself over a woman again. From there, I traveled to Germany. I moved all my paperwork from England back to the United States. I took some money and decided to take a vacation for a few weeks. I bought a backpack. I was in my early 20s. I decided to see a little bit of Europe. I thought I would travel around Europe a little bit and then maybe go home to Pennsylvania. Yes, just go home and stay there for a while." Mrs. Manning looked at Alyssa and frowned. "And you? You didn't do anything?" Alyssa replied, "Yes. I decided to find him. First, I went home and told Mom and Dad about the bet, and then I told them I was going to go get him." Alyssa paused, then continued. "I guess this is where I should tell everyone about how rich, self-centered my parents said nothing. But that wasn't true. At first, they were furious about the bet. You see, they really liked Gavin," she pointed at me again. "They thought he was the greatest. Up to that point, I had been something of a wild child. I wasn't promiscuous. No, I wasn't a full-fledged virgin. My parents had seen all the things I had only recently realized. Gavin was young and innocent in many ways, but he was... well, he was a real man. Not the zwing and carry kind. He was the kind who stood his ground and didn't give up." Alyssa coughed. I realized what she was doing. She choked back tears, but pulled herself together and continued. "My parents were furious. I was their only child. I had already been in a skiing accident. They were afraid they were going to lose me. They made me promise to call every night. Dad, being a government employee, could keep tabs not only on me, but on Gavin if he ever used his credit cards." "So you've been chasing him all over Europe?" Melissa suggested. Alyssa grinned and replied, "Not at all. I'm not stupid. Gavin is a geneticist. He has been doing research using very rare Neanderthal DNA. I correctly assumed that the first place he would go would be Neander, Germany. I checked flights, bought a ticket to Cologne, then rented a car, drove to Dusseldorf, from there to the Neander Valley, and then to Neander. Shawcroft asked, "Was he there? Did you find him?" Alyssa replied, "Yes, I found him. He was there." Shawcroft continued, "And then?" "Well, I found it," Alyssa replied. "It was in the museum." Melissa asked, "Yeah, and then?" Alyssa smiled and replied, "When I found him, he was looking at some very tiny artifacts. I remember he was wearing glasses with thick lenses. I ran up behind him. I turned him around. He's thin, so it was easy to move him around. I turned him around and I said, yes." Melissa asked, "Then what did he do?" Alyssa replied, "First he asked me if it was part of the bet. I told him it wasn't. I meant it. Then I asked him for a ring, and guess what? It was in his pocket. He took it out and put it on my finger." She reached for my throat and held out a thin gold chain. "Here it is. Since we got divorced, I don't wear it on my finger, but I keep it here, on the chain, next to my heart. Look, it's the same ring as the wedding ring. Look, the same quarter carat." She held out the ring for all to see. Shawcroft leaned back in his chair, as if he had just finished reading a good book. "And then you two got married and have lived happily ever after." Alyssa looked at me. "No. First we had 3 children, and then I divorced him." Shawcroft looked puzzled. "Why? What was he hiding from you? Did you leave him?" I interrupted then. "No and no. She divorced me because she's stupid." Shawcroft shifted his gaze from me to Alyssa. "I don't understand." I looked at Alyssa. "Tell him he's stupid." Alyssa shook her head. I thought she was about to start one of her stupid fake crybabies, but she mumbled, "I have my reasons." I was pissed. It had pissed me off for years now. "If you don't tell them, I will." Alyssa threw her head back, pulled her dress almost all the way up, and said, "Look." I had seen this little charade before, so I just sat there and watched. Melissa looked at her feet, and then at her face. "What? I don't see anything." Shawcroft threw a quick glance at her, but looked at me instead. "I don't see anything either." Alyssa pulled her dress back down. "I have a degenerative neuromuscular disease." Melissa looked completely stunned. "You have something like multiple sclerosis and you divorced your husband? That doesn't make any sense. He didn't pass it on to you. He couldn't have." I clapped my hands together. Another person with a smart remark. Melissa looked at me like she didn't know if I was being sarcastic or mocking. Shawcroft interjected, "I still don't get it." I tried to clarify. "It's not MS, but the skiing accident she had when she was in college seems to have slowly turned into something that gets worse and worse with age. We've been working on it for the past few years. We seem to have run out of doable surgical options." Alyssa poured some more gasoline on the fire. "I'm never going to get better. I will die confined to a wheelchair or bed. I'll be a useless invalid, a helpless cripple." I shook my head. "She's having one of her stupid seizures right now." Alyssa spoke again. "Don't you see? I'm a cripple. I can barely walk." She pointed to a young man standing in the shadows in the corner of the room. "That's our son. He's here to take us home. This is my wheelchair." She pointed to the chair he had placed beside her. "You may not have noticed, but both before and after the wedding, Gavin had to half-carry me in his arms to and from the church. I can only walk a few steps. I can't do anything on my own anymore. Gavin has to do everything." I held up my hand and beckoned our son Michael to come over. He began to roll the chair toward us. Shawcroft scratched his head. "Honestly, Mrs. McLeod, or Ms. Trevelyan, or whoever you are, that's the stupidest reason for divorce I've ever heard." I raised my right hand into a fist. "I agree. I wholeheartedly agree." Alyssa seemed to sob. You don't understand. My Gavin, I mean asshole, has an active life. He needs a whole woman. He needs someone he can share everything with. We used to ski, mountain bike, scuba dive, rock climb together. Now we can't do any of those things, and it's all because of me. Melissa said, "So you live apart, but for events like today's wedding, it was our eldest daughter's wedding, you get together." I laughed. "Not at all. In a few minutes, we will both be getting into her specialized vehicle. Michael will drive us home. We'll go upstairs as we always do, and a little later in the evening, we'll make insanely passionate love. In fact, except for a few minor changes, our lovemaking will be just as ardent, just as intense, and just as meaningful as it was before we learned of our discomfort. Later, after we make love, I'll go downstairs and make us something to eat. Maybe we'll watch TV or read. Either way, we'll do it together. Married or not, we're a couple." Then Shawcroft, as if to complete my wife's silly story, said, "So, she was hurt. She decided to divorce you so you could do what you were doing before, but you both still live together. You both still make love, and if I may say so without being too verbose, you both still have a very strong bond with each other." I nodded. "That's for sure," and looked at Alyssa. Her lower lip was jutting out and trembling in a death cry. I said calmly, "Alyssa." She brushed away a tear and threw her head back in defiance. Mr. Andrews, the club president, smiled and said, "Mr. McLeod, Miss Trevelyan, if you don't mind, we'd like to finish cleaning up so we can send our men home. They've had a busy day." I knew Patrick Andrews well, so I said, "Sure, sorry we were delayed." I walked over and lifted my wife into my arms and smiled at my son. "I think I'll carry her to the car." Alyssa wrapped her arms around my neck. "I'm sorry, Gavin, I think I'm a little tired. I'll probably be too tired for church tomorrow." I kissed the top of her head. "It's okay, honey. We were at church today," and then paused. "Do me a favor, okay?" "What favor, honey?" I asked. "Will you marry me again?" She replied rather wistfully, "No, but if we hurry home, I will." Then she leaned over and whispered something in my ear. I kissed the top of her head again. "Okay, I'll let you, but only if you let me," I whispered in her ear. She nuzzled against my chin. "That seems fair." She kissed my neck. "You know we're living in sin, don't you?" I squeezed her tightly. "That's because you're stupid, sweetheart." She wrapped her arms even tighter around my neck. "I love you so much, but I want you to be free." I kissed her again. "Just shut up." And that was the end of it. They never got married. Alyssa was convinced that since her illness was making her weaker and weaker, Gavin should be free to do whatever he wanted without feeling guilty. At the same time, he can never make her realize that his freedom and happiness are inextricably linked to her full presence in his life. Married or divorced, they would remain together side by side, completely and unconditionally united until death. And so it remained. The end! Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.